Namaskarams to all. I am delighted to be here, not just because my friend Arnab called me, but also because it's a very different media, a very different atmosphere, a very different inclination about the nation, which, as someone who has been associated with the media for almost 50 years, has not witnessed in recent times. The Indian Express with which we was associated was setting the agenda of India because it was committed to the nation. It was not committed to anything else. It didn't have even shareholders to satisfy. So it had a much larger, deeper commitment to the country. But after globalization swept across, the entire media became so commercialized that it had nothing left in it to call itself as a spirited nationalist media. After a long time, I find in Arnab and in Republic the commitment to nationalism with which I was associated in the Indian Express of the Ramnath Goenka days. So I am happy that I am invited to address this nationalist collective. You know, the idea of nationalism, as Arnab said, which I was discussing with him as I was coming here, is an idea which is very recent and not only recent, it is also a top-down idea. Nations were created by kings. Nations were created by marriages. Nations were created by concubinages. That was the state of nationhood in Europe. And the idea of nation and nationalism that was developed was very violent. There was bloodshed. It was territorial nationalism. With the result, the very idea of nationalism acquired a bad name, an order which could not be accepted by civilized societies. But our nationalism is not top-down nationalism. It is a bottom-upwards nationalism. This nationalism was built by saints, seers, philosophers, people who had only peace and harmony in mind. I will immediately take you to a study by the Hawaii University professor, Professor Ramal, R.J. Ramal. He made a study of 2,500 years of violence all over the world. Human beings massacring human beings. And he said a minimum of 680 million people and a maximum of 1.2 billion people have been slaughtered in different human action against human beings. He listed where, how that inhuman actions took place. The only geography where there was no mass killing till the 13th century was Bharat. When the whole world was letting blood, what is it that kept us in peace and harmony? It was not the king. It was the great work done by our philosophers and saints and seers who made a whole population, which is 1/6 of humanity, perhaps much more at that time, to live in peace and harmony with each other, despite all the differences. In fact, there are studies which show that India is the only country which could manage to live with so many gods. In fact, the number of gods in India was more than the number of people living in India, 33 crore gods. Gods could not divide us. Whereas one God can set the whole world on fire. Whether your God is superior or my God is superior, let us have a boxing match to decide. Let us have a war to decide. Let us have a bomb to decide. This is the ideology which the rest of the world practiced. But in India, we could live with any number of gods. This is something which a professor of economics in Switzerland noticed, that India is the only country which taught people how to live with different ways of worship and gods. And that is why there is no violence in India. The only violent war that was declared as an adharmic war was the war waged by Emperor Ashoka, because he did not give notice to the other side and attacked the other side and killed 100,000 people. It was not regarded as in tune with this civilizational spirit of India. So you have to understand India in this sense before you understand what is Indian nationalism. Swami Vivekananda said, India is a union of the hearts of those which beats to the same spiritual tune. This is India. It is not religious. There is an idea much above religion. The idea of dharma. That is what made India a country where, when the whole world was letting blood, there was complete peace and harmony. With this introduction, I would like to say that this debate is long overdue. This debate must have taken place much ahead, immediately after the partition of India, because after partition of India, the idea of India got distorted. It was not only distorted, the very idea of India was disrupted. This is what I have to relate to you before coming to what Nationalist Conclave has to do. You know, after independence, we became arrested by context. We became victims of contextualization. We began to be driven by day-to-day politics. We began to be driven by elections. We began to be driven by the idea of how to win elections, even at the cost of nation, even at the cost of the idea of India. But that is not what drove the freedom movement. The freedom movement was driven by such higher values, higher ideas, led by people of such high caliber, that there was a disruption. That is where I am going to take you now. You know, 3 generations of Indians have been completely turned illiterate, at least ignorant about the idea of India post-independence. What was the idea that drove the freedom movement? If you compare it, then you will know the extent of ignorance into which we have been driven by our education system, by our media, by our government. So unless you capture the contrast, we will not be able to know what nationalist collective can do and should do, what nationalists should do, what the media should do. First, we must understand that the freedom movement was driven by the idea of Hindu nationalism. Hindu nationalism not in the sense of a religious nationalism, but a civilizational cultural nationalism, which was articulated by Swami Vivekananda. And it was accepted. Swami Vivekananda was the father of the Indian freedom movement, not only by Mahatma Gandhi or Rajaji or even by Pandit Nehru. I will quote what Pandit Nehru had to say because he is the most important man in the context of what we are going to talk. Nehru said, I quote, a number of people who took more or less active part in the freedom movement drew their inspiration from Swami Vivekananda. Directly or indirectly, he has powerfully influenced India. This was the drive of the freedom movement. The freedom movement did not originate in an emperor. It did not originate in a religion. It originated in a saint. A saint's idea. Now, this origination, how it proceeded, is very important. This idea of nationalism, which Swami Vivekananda expounded. There is nothing called propounding because this nation has been in existence for 5,000 years. And so there is nothing new to be propounded. It is to draw inspiration from the way in which this country has moved with peace and harmony, without violence, with mutual relationships unheard of in the world, without the mediation of a state. It's something, a society which has got upon its own. Unless we understand that a state-based nation-state approach, a top-down approach will never make you understand India. Otherwise, you will be thinking India as a geographical construct. It is because of geographical continuity, we happen to be living together, we are a nation, is the worst way of constructing Indian nationalism. Now, who expounded the idea of India? And I am going to quote them in their own ways. After Swami Vivekananda, It is Maharishi Aurobindo. It was in 1909, he said in the Uttarpara speech, I say it is Sanatana Dharma, which is for us nationalism. The Hindu nation was born with Sanatana Dharma. With it, it moves, with it grows, and Sanatana Dharma declines, this nation declines. And if Sanatana Dharma were capable of perishing, with Sanatana Dharma, this nation will also perish. Sanatana Dharma, that is nationalism. This is the message I have to speak to you, is the last speech which he delivered after he was released from the prosecution and he came to Pondicherry. This was Maharishi Aurobindo. Then comes Mahatma Gandhi in the same year. I don't know how many of you are aware of Mahatma Gandhi's Hind Swaraj book. That's not a book which he wrote. That's a dialogue between Mahatma Gandhi, the reader, doubling as Mahatma Gandhi, the editor. And he wrote this when he was traveling between Cape Town to London in a ship. And he was possessed by a thought which completely took him out of his consciousness. And he began writing in Gujarati. He didn't find papers. He had to borrow papers and read. When his right hand pained, he began writing by left hand. This is a dialogue. And the dialogue was, whatever the questions, suspicions, doubts, misapprehensions the people of India had about India and how they were eulogizing the British at the time, the reader asked the question. And the reader Mahatma Gandhi asked the question and the editor Mahatma Gandhi answers. One of the questions is, who said India is one nation? It is British through their railways, through their post offices, through their government. They brought India and turned into one nation. What is your answer, Mr. Editor? Mahatma Gandhi answers. I am quoting it. The English have taught us that we were not one nation before, and it will require centuries before we become one nation. This is without foundation. We were one nation before they came to India. One thought inspired us. Our mode of life was the same. It was because of we were one nation, they were able to establish one kingdom. Subsequently, they divided us. The most important part of what Mahatma Gandhi held to be the idea of India, I am going to read out to you now. I do not wish to suggest that because we were one nation, we had no differences. But it is submitted that our leading men traveled throughout India, either on foot or in bullock carts. They learned one another's languages, and there was no aloofness between them. What do you think would have been the intention of those far-seeing ancestors of ours who established Setubandha, Rameshwar in the south, Jagannath in the east, Hardwar in the north as places of pilgrimage? You will admit they were no fools. They knew that worship of gods could have been performed just as well at home. They taught us that those whose hearts were aglow with righteousness, with Ganges in their homes, they saw that India was one undivided land, so made by nature. They therefore argued that it must be one nation. Arguing thus, they established holy places in various parts of India and fired the people with an idea of nationality in a manner unknown in other parts of the world. The last sentence is so important, I am going to read out to you. And we Indians are one in the manner in which no two Englishmen are. It is color that united them. Even language did not unite them. How many people know when France was formed, less than 2% of the people spoke the French language? When Italy was formed, less than 10% of the people spoke the Italian language. This was nationalism, top-down nationalism. But here is nation which existed as a matter of consciousness. It is a higher consciousness that anyone coming anywhere is our brother. He was fed, he was received as Atithi. No one went with any preparation. I was in Kumbh Mela only for 3 days. I wish I could have been there for 45 days. You know, crores of people came. They came with children. They came with old people. They came with infirm people. Nobody came with bed. Nobody came with food. Nobody had any preparation as to where they would stay. There is Shipraji who is sitting here. she had established a small hut there. I happened to stay there. And when I went and met these great saints and seers, I was surprised at how illiterate I am about India. How the Naga sadhus had sworn to defend India. How Emperor Akbar was met by Swami Madhusudan Saraswati, who said that our people are being slaughtered and killed, our saints and our sannyasis are being killed by our people. You are not protecting them. Emperor said, gentlemen, I cannot stop our people from killing. You start an army to kill our people. I will not take action against both. This is a recorded history. Then the Naga sadhus were given arms. And the fourth Varna people were also brought in. The Naga sadhus take a vow to defend India is not a matter which is known to India. We only look upon them as curious. This is the distance between us and how this country is safeguarded by people who are sworn to defend this country. And Mahatma Gandhi was right. And I found in a latest book what Mahatma Gandhi did to build the Congress. In the Nagpur Congress session in 1920, he invited the Naga sadhus. The British were stunned because Naga sadhus had such a deep reach in the society. And the secret document which I read showed that if the Naga sadhus and farmers, if the saints and farmers come together, the British will have to vacate India. That is why Mahatma Gandhi became a farmer in appearance and he also became a saint in appearance. It was not that Mahatma Gandhi with a coat or suit could never have influenced India. He identified with India. 1 year he traveled across India to know what is India's mind, what is India's likings, what is India's vibrating points. And a new Mahatma Gandhi was born. And that Mahatma Gandhi recognized that India's consciousness is built around people moving from one end of the country. Every part of India is sacred. Is the consciousness of India that makes Indian nationalism. Now I will immediately go to America. There was a debate after Trump came to power in 2020, there was a debate after Trump went out of power as to what's happening in China, in America. In 2022 September, a letter was written by 5 army chief of staff and 6 defense secretaries to Pentagon. They said America is so divided today that no one, Democrat doesn't want to look at a Republican doesn't want to look at a Democrat, and a Democrat doesn't want to get married into a Republican's house and vice versa. That used to be a 5% difference between the two parties has grown into a 60% difference. And there is violence in each people's mind. It is not based on color, it is based on religion, it is based on the place from where people have come. And so if a Trump or Trump-like figure contests the elections in 2024 and loses, there will be civil war in America. Army will not maintain neutrality. This is the letter. You can find this letter in internet. Then Pew Research wrote a research story. Every country is politically polarized, and America is also polarized. But there is a difference. There is no commonality in America. There is nothing in America which keeps America together except the government, the army, the court, the police. It compares. 2015 Time magazine brought out that in Italy there are 30,000 canonized saints. In America, just 3. In 1774, 1. In 2001 and 2. There is no sacred person. There is no sacred mountain. There is no sacred river. There is no sacred place. Come to Gandhi's India. Everything is sacred. The idea that this country is Punya Bhumi, Karma Bhumi, Moksha Bhumi, which Swami Vivekananda said, constitutes the national consciousness of India. If you are part of it, you will feel it. Even if you are not part of it, you have to understand it. Even if you don't understand it, you have got to understand that such a consciousness exists and that keeps the country together. And so this is what, this idea was shared even by Pandit Nehru. the most important person about whom I have to read out to you. He said, Vivekananda's Hindu nationalism. He writes, not in one of his speeches, which could be that he spoke on behalf. He wrote a very considered book, which is one of his best books, and that was Glimpses of World History in 1935. And he wrote in that, at page 437, a famous disciple of Vivekananda, Ramakrishna was Swami Vivekananda, who eloquently and forcefully preached the concept of nationalism. Vivekananda's nationalism was Hindu nationalism, and it had its root in Hindu religion and culture. Last sentence is very important. This was not in any way anti-Muslim or anti-anyone else. This is Pandit Nehru, 1935, page 437, Glimpses of World History. Now he goes to say more. See, the idea of Indian nationalist consciousness is so subtle. It is not easy, he says, to draw a line between Hindu nationalism and nationalism. The two overlap, as India is the only home of Hindus and they form majority here. This is not a majority-minority calculation, it is a sharing of an idea handed down for thousands of years by a way of life, by a continuity which is denied to all other nations, all other civilizations. Swami Vivekananda said, if you have to know what is Greek civilization or Roman civilization, you have to look at the broken monuments. If you want to know what is the Egyptian civilization, you have to go and look at the pyramids. Here is a living civilization. He said Vedavyasa came to India and walked across the country. He will see some of the traffic signals which he saw at that time, even today. That is the extent of continuity that the Indian civilization has maintained. It is not because of government, it is not because of state, it is not because of army. It is because of the great work done by our seers and saints. That is not what we know. And the most important thing is there was one Rajani Palme Dutt. I don't know how many of you know about him. Balbir Punj, who is my friend, who is sitting there, he gave that book to me. He wrote a book called India Today in 1937. At that time, the British were saying that you got the idea of freedom from the universities and colleges where we taught English, and it is the knowledge of English which gave you the spirit of freedom. It is we who created your freedom movement. This is what the white man said. Rajani Palme Dutt responds to that. It is very important. I would like to read this to you. Sorry, somewhere I am missing. Vedas gives us the spirit of freedom. Communist leader Rajani Palme Dutt. You know, he formed the Communist Party in England, an Indian. And he wrote this book and rebutting the British's charge. That is the English education which gave us the spirit of freedom. He says, if Indian bourgeois had been educated only in Sanskrit Vedas, in the monastic seclusion from every other current of thought, they would have assuredly found in the Sanskrit Vedas the inspiring principles and slogans for their struggle for freedom. He wrote it in 1940. This book was revised and edited in 1973. He was alive. He didn't change this. Everything changes on one day. The day on which Jinnah declared Pakistan and spread the two-nation theory. The entire nationalist leadership dropped the word Hindu and ran away. The idea of Hindu nationalism, Indian nationalism became deserted. And why? They wanted to avoid partition. They could not avoid partition. But in the process, they compromised with the very idea of India. And after 1947, we could have corrected it. But we made it much worse. Even the very word Hindu became a burden. You know, I have worked for the Hindu cause for the last 50 years. Emergency was the time when I first went underground and fought against the dictatorship as an RSS worker. And we were all spat upon because we called ourselves Hindus. And I was a very reasonably well-respected corporate consultant. My own friends in the corporate world will not look at me with comfort because I was calling myself a Hindu nationalist. That was the extent of struggle that Indian nationalism had to wage in order to survive. And this perverted secularism almost killed the idea of nationalism in India. We all know it. But the Ram Temple movement recalled the pre-independence national spirit. Even the idea of Vande Mataram, even the idea of Ramaraja became outdated. Vande Mataram became communal in India. Bharat Mata Ki Jai was considered to be a sectarian slogan, that which made people kiss the gallows and go to jail. That was the extent to which India had become a rotten society. Ram Janmabhoomi recovered this country, recovered the people, and made them recall the past. With the result, the word Hindutva became respectable. When the BJP put it in the manifesto, I am not getting into politics, I am more into the constitutional principles on the basis of which this case was decided. So when Hindutva was charged as communal and election petitions were made to disqualify the Shiv Sena and BJP members for having called themselves Hindutva, the Supreme Court decided, who said Hindutva is communal? Who said Hinduism is communal? I am going to read out what the Supreme Court said, which completely settles the constitutional principle that what constitutes the core philosophy of Indian nationalism, that is the Hindu philosophy, Hindu way of life, the ethos of India, is consistent with the Constitution of India. This is 1995 Hindutva judgment. I am going to read this out to you. 1995 Supreme Court judgment. No precise meaning can be attributed to the term Hindu or Hindutva or Hinduism, and no meaning in the abstract can confine it to the narrow limits of religion, excluding the content of Indian culture and heritage. It is also indicated the term Hindutva is more the way of life of the people in the subcontinent and their ethos and their culture. This judgment of 1995, all the parties during the UPA period, at least 3 petitions were made to ask the Supreme Court to review this judgment. This is the only judgment out of 4 times the requests were made for review. The Supreme Court said no. So the pre-independence nationalist spirit, which was rejected, which was trivialized, which was trashed, has now found constitutional acceptance. It is our way of doing things, our ethos, our culture. And Jawaharlal Nehru wrote in 1937 in the Foreign Affairs magazine that the Indian freedom movement is cultural. All this was given up later. So now coming to how we proceed from here, the only organization which kept this, everybody left this deserted, orphaned, the idea of India. The only organization which kept this alive is the RSS. Whether you like it or not. You may not like the organization. But they kept on, they ensured that this flame was alive. And that is how the Ram Janmabhoomi movement came. And that is how the whole pre-independence values were recovered. And with the Supreme Court legitimizing this, we are now having an idea that the whole past, which is captured in the idea of Indian nationalism, which is Hindu nationalism, sans religion. There is no religion in it. There is no particular God in it. There is no particular way of worship in it. In fact, I would have loved Republic TV to cover the Kumbh Mela in deep. How many methods of worship? Thousands and thousands of methods of worship, each conflicting with the other. not matching with other, coexisting in the same place. And millions of people going and paying obeisance to those people who had different ways of worship. This is the idea of India. When you say unity in diversity, it is unified diversity. That is how we have been able to keep this country together for 5,000 years, despite all the invasions, attacks, violence. And now I will go to the last part of my speech. The civilizational rise of India is the most important factor that made the Indian nationalism respectable, and that started with the Pokhran II explosion, atomic explosion. India never looked back afterwards. I was advising the government at that time. The entire finance ministry was scoffing at the government for having destroyed the finances of India. The stock market was crashing. At that time, Vajpayee issued an appeal to non-resident Indians. We needed $5 billion to overcome the crisis. The foreigners will not give us $1 because the Indian rupee was going down every day. So we appealed to the non-resident Indians to contribute to the India development bonds. We wanted $5 billion. They gave us $6.2 billion, from which the Indian economy never looked back. You know, from 1950 to 2025, if you look at the external balances of India, it was only in 2002, 2003, 2004. India had current account surplus of $25 billion. There were sanctions. In fact, Abdul Kalam used to tell me, Mr. Gurumurthy, ensure that this sanction continues for some more time so that we will develop our own technology. This is the alternative view that had developed at that point in time. So you must understand, India's rise as a civilization rested on India's capacity to tell the West that we are also a power and we will match you soon. At that time, we were not in a position to do it. But we have begun doing it, and there are parallel developments. I will conclude it. It is not that India is something which is an autonomous development. Those who know about Japan, you know about Yasukuni Temple. Yasukuni Temple was proscribed for worship by the Japanese, by the American administration, by a constitution amendment. You know why? 2.8 million soldiers who laid down their life for Japan, their names are inscribed. That constitutes the consciousness of Japan. People go and worship there. So they proscribed it. Nobody could go there. No leader would go there. Yasukuni means it is something which is warmongering. And more than that, the war hero of Japan, General Tojo, his urn was smuggled and kept there. In 1948, like Ram's idols were kept in Ram Janmabhoomi. Parallel. Ram Janmabhoomi movement rose in 1995. In 2004, Koizumi, who was the Prime Minister of Japan, went and worshipped in Yasukuni Temple. The whole world pounced on him. China, Korea, America, Russia. He just worshipped and came back. That's all. And Abe, in his first term, he didn't go. In the second term, he went and worshipped. Whole world had accepted it by that time. When Abe was asked, what do you feel? He said, I felt bad because I didn't come in the first term. In Japan, Shintoism and Yasukuni Temple has been normalized. In India, Ram Janmabhoomi has been normalized. You look at China, not a very great example for us, but we must notice what is happening in the world. Confucian thoughts were destroyed in 1965, Cultural Revolution. His books were burnt. His statues were demolished. Today, Neo-Confucianism is the new identity of China. And they have established 372 Neo-Confucian centers all over the world. And Xi Jinping, the Communist Party, fought against the entire past and civilization, culture, values, religion of China. He now says 5,000 years of Chinese civilization is guiding us, will guide us in future. We are living in a civilizational world today where nationalism is the most important, most critical philosophy. And I am extremely happy that Republic TV has taken up this mission, and I want this to become a movement, a mass movement outside the realm of politics, government, outside the realms of narrow interest, and I would like Arnab to take this as a mission and do it. Thank you very much.